Hi, thanks for coming to my channel. So I've just seen a report on LBC. It's quite a long report, so I won't read out the whole thing. But basically, Extinction Rebellion have been up to their old antics. They, I say old because they've been doing this now for about 2 years. Um, and it seems to me they just get more and more outrageous in their stunts. Um, I've I've never, shied away from the fact that I have no time for this movement. Um, I don't think that they are really responsible environmentalists. I don't think they should be given that accolade. I don't even think they should be called environmentalists at this point because it's so obvious that their main concern is their own ego and these attention grabbing stunts. Now, there could be a school of thought that says perhaps it's best not to cover them because that's what they want. But I do think there's a debate to be had about their claims to be motivated by climate change. Maybe some of them really are. I accept that. I accept that there will be people who are associate with themselves with Extinction Rebellion, or might even be Extinction Rebellion activists, who look at flooding around the world, look at record heat waves and so on, and they're genuinely concerned about it. The problem is they are endorsing a cult-like movement that's not responsible, that's polarizing the public, and hasn't really got any solutions to the problem. You know, um, One of the biggest problems of Extinction Rebellion is this idea that they and they alone should be the sole voice of this movement. I'm not one of these people that sort of says, oh, it's all a big exaggeration, there's no problem with climate change. This year um, has shown that there is definitely something going on. I mean, when you get 49 degrees in British Columbia, when you get record floods in Germany, um, at least I think they're the worst in decades anyway. Records are being broken all the time in terms of heat waves. So I don't think that could be dismissed. I think there is a serious problem going on here. And I think it's a major priority for governments to address. This is going to be a very big issue coming up to the Glasgow Climate Change Summit in, I believe it's October or November. Um, but I really think that Extinction Rebellion causes a lot more harm than good. They claim that they open up debate about the issue. Well, when these sort of reports happen, what are people talking about? Are they talking about record temperatures? Are they talking about flooding? No, they're talking about the outrageous antics of Extinction Rebellion. That to me indicates that this is a movement that's far more interested in their own ego. So in the latest protests, although I'm reluctant to use that term, I won't read out the whole report like I said it's long, but basically I'll read out the first few paragraphs. Extinction Rebellion activists have targeted various financial institutions in the City of London in the latest action. Extinction Rebellion protesters have stuck twopence coins to the floor outside the London Stock Exchange with chewing gum. Well, that's a very green move. Do they not see the irony that that chewing gum will have to be blasted off, which takes water? It's as part of a march through London's financial centre, the group have targeted various institutions that they claim facilitate climate change. They first gathered at the Bank of England before embarking on a march through central London. It sprayed the Standard Chartered building in the City of London with red paint and climbed on top of the building's entrances. The march then moved on to the Guildhall and law firm De Voice, I think that's pronounced, and Plimpton, both of which were also sprayed with red paint. There appears to be hundreds of activists in attendance. The group are calling the day's march a bank tour of London. Police are in attendance and have formed a line. This was obviously written as it happened. Have formed a line between the marchers and the targeted buildings. Over 100 people have so far been arrested in the group's protests, with 52 on the first day and 40 on the second. I'll come back to that because I don't think it's having any effect. Later in the protest, marchers reached the London Museum and the AFP London Towers. The marchers then proceeded to the London Stock Exchange where they heard a series of speeches. The action is part of the group's Blood Money March, targeting London's financial hub. Protesters were repeatedly heard calling blood money. The event's Facebook page states Blood Money is a march through the City of London intended to highlight the institution's complicity, that should be, in environmental racism and exploitation. Now that's significant because that shows actually, this is not just a green movement. What they're doing there is tapping into really a far left worldview that every Western institution is deeply racist and it's all part of a neo-colonialist project. This is the sort of intersectionalism of the left, where you get racism overlapping with climate change. Well, how does that explain the fact that Canadians and Germans have suffered this year? You know, um, I'm not going to deny that some of the world's poorest people in developing countries suffer greatly from the effects of climate change. But I think it is toxic to have this sort of narrative stuck into this that it's racism. It's a very, very toxic narrative. It's kind of paradoxical because on one hand they're arguing this is a worldwide problem. It's going to affect everyone on the planet. We need to take it seriously, right? That's a valid argument. Then they're saying it's all part of it. It's all, it's a racism issue. Um, so the narrative is Western wealthy countries are racist because, in Extinction Rebellion's opinion, not enough is being done. Well, are they going to include China and India, which are two of the biggest carbon emitters in the world? I mean, the world's most polluted cities are in India. Delhi's record is appalling. Um, China's actually somewhat improved. The air quality in Chinese cities has somewhat improved. It's one of the few good things Xi Jinping's regime has done. Um, but the whole racism narrative, to me, it taps into a very far left worldview, which you get very much in university campuses these days. Buckingham Palace Memorial vandalised amid London protests. Along the route, we hear about the blood-soaked profiteering of our economic system, the banks that fuel the fund fossil fuel projects, especially in the global south, the law firms that represent them, and the institutions that enable them to operate with impunity. Um, and they want to talk about how these institutions are complicit in environmental racism and exploitation. But again, how do they then? How does that tap into the fact that the Chinese and Indian governments, again, those two countries are some of the biggest carbon emitters in the world. So it just doesn't tie into their narrative, unless they're going to say that Indian and Chinese governments are also racist. Um, so I really have a big problem with that. Uh, I've no, this isn't about like if they were talking, for example, about the plight of Bangladeshi fishermen or a farmer in Ethiopia. That's a legitimate argument. But what they're really doing is tapping into this very middle class. It largely is um, woke ideology. I mean, the thing with Extinction Rebellion is, well, there's a lot of things with Extinction Rebellion, but the irony is that the cost it's going to take to remove that chewing gum, to clean up the paint damage. This is not a peaceful protest. It's not. Vandalism is not peaceful. Extinction Rebellion seem to think that the fact they're not throwing punches and they're not physically violent means that they're therefore peaceful. I don't agree with that. I think if you are doing nothing but causing vandalism, if you're deliberately hurting the public, stopping them getting to work, I mean, who can forget those scenes where those Extinction Rebellion activists got onto the London Underground and physically stopped people getting to work? The London Underground is one of the comparatively cleanest forms of transport. So I really do believe they're far, far more interested in their own ego. But, I mentioned about arrests. I think the reason that they keep coming back is because there's no real deterrent. They get arrested, it's probably put on a record, they'll spend a night in a cell and that's it. They kind of see it as a badge of honor. They're revolutionaries, right? It's no major hardship. They're not being put in jail for a long time. I'm not suggesting they should be. I think they're being funded. I think what needs to happen is their founders, their co-founders, people like Roger Hallam, need to be absolutely hammered with fines for the damage. Hammered. I'd like to see them made bankrupt because I think this is a very, very negative force. I don't think they're an asset to the wider environmental movement. Any movement that polarizes the public, to me, is a negative force. Whatever your cause is, whatever it is, whether it be egalitarianism, human rights, environmentalism, whatever the issue is, when you polarize the public, you're going to lose. But Extinction Rebellion are arrogant. They know best. And people like me who criticize them, oh, well, I must be in denial about climate change. I don't care. I care a lot. I care about the fact that we are getting hotter summers. I mean, the sort of forecasts that have been made are shocking. But I think that one of the problems is Extinction Rebellion's extreme tactics. That's what's taking up the headlines. And they're so arrogant that they can't see this. They're so self-righteous and so consumed by their own egotistical stunts that they say, oh, but we are making a difference because we're getting people to talk about the issues. No, you're not. How arrogant. People are talking about the issues because it's on the news, because these are things that are happening. People are concerned and people are being affected. They're not talking about them because Extinction Rebellion decides to glue themselves to a building or throw paint over a building or dig up the lawn at the grass at Cambridge University. I mean, can someone rationalize what that's going to do for green issues? Digging up the lawn at Cambridge University? So, quite honestly, I can't stand Extinction Rebellion. And when people condemned the policing bill earlier this year, they need to look at the context. That was brought in by the Home Secretary because it was pushed by the Home Secretary because there was heavy criticism of the Metropolitan Police. This is very important to understand that you had these Extinction Rebellion anarchists, that's what I think they are, causing mass destruction, and the police seem impotent to act against them. And then that got translated into, oh, this is totalitarian. Boris Johnson's fascist government. This is what was being said. Is crushing freedom of assembly. It's such a distortion. That is not what was happening. Now, if the government turns around and says, if you go out in a protest, you're a terrorist, or you should be forbidden from making a peaceful protest, then I would say, yes, this is a totalitarian move. But the wider public is sick and tired of Extinction Rebellion. That's the point. This group has a membership at most of 300,000 in a country of 68 million. So they do not have wider public support. There'll be a lot of people who say, well, yeah, I'm concerned about environmental issues, but I don't like their tactics. Time and time and time again. But they're too arrogant to change. They're too arrogant to step back and think, well, is this really working? I think they're a cult, and I can't stand them. Incidentally, a personal note, people I know who are in Extinction Rebellion, so I probably should clarify when I say I can't stand them, I'm talking about the movement, not necessarily individuals. I've personally known people who I know to be decent people, kind people, generous people, and I assume reasonably intelligent people. Unfortunately, they got well into Extinction Rebellion, and the person in question asked me if I'd want to join in. I flatly refused for the reasons I've stated in this video. So, like any movement, you can get people sucked into it who are not bad people. I would urge those individuals. If you've kind of associated yourself with Extinction Rebellion, that you're concerned about rising temperatures, you're concerned about flooding, I get those concerns. You can still campaign, you can still be concerned about those issues. All I'm saying is be wary of this organization because when they start bringing other issues into it, there is that really an environmental movement? When they vandalize buildings, do you really think that will save a single Bangladeshi fisherman or Ethiopian farmer? It won't. And that's my biggest issue with Extinction Rebellion. They have no solutions. They're a dystopian cult. They have no solutions. All they have is condemnation. All they have is their egotistical stunts. So, they might say, oh, but you're only attacking us. Yeah, because you have stated. Roger Hallam has encouraged Extinction Rebellion members to hurt the public. These people are extremists. I'm talking about the co-founders. I believe Roger Hallam's an extremist, given the statements he's made. Um, but I believe there's people in Extinction Rebellion, like many other movements, like Black Lives Matter, like the Women's March, like you name it. There's plenty of other movements that have some valid arguments, but then they get hijacked by extremists. And I think that's the case with Extinction Rebellion. So if you are an active member of Extinction Rebellion, but you're uncomfortable with some of this stuff, you're a free person. Leave. Be an environmental activist. Just don't associate with this movement. That's what I would amicably suggest. I'm not telling anyone what to do, but in my opinion, Extinction Rebellion causes far more harm than good.